Tristan, what do you think the prosecution is trying to accomplish with Davidson's testimony?
I think the key there is to show that it's the purpose of all of this. I think that's what they're really leading up toward here. Why were they doing this? And the delay is a tell. It gives us a hint as to exactly what Team Trump was going after here. They were trying to delay the payment until after the election, because after that it wasn't really relevant. Win or lose, the whole point was to keep this out of the public eye before the election. If he lost the election, we don't know what he would have done next. He might have just decided he wasn't going to run for anything again. We don't know. If he won, which he did, then maybe he could just quietly get away with not paying it, and maybe there would be some sort of implied threat that he would do something to them if they continued to try to raise these stories in the media. But the whole point is it's about the fact that it was around the election. Mm-hmm. That's the key that the prosecution's leading up to. It wasn't just that they were hiding these things from Melania. They were hiding these things because of the election. And that's key because it's the campaign finance related part of this that elevates this from a misdemeanor into a felony.
And hey, guys, I want to mention that there is a camera ready for some remarks from the president. Unclear exactly what he's going to address in these remarks, but we're watching for that. We're going to bring those remarks to you at home live. So as soon as that happens, we'll take them. In the meantime, let's return to our conversation about what's happening inside this Manhattan courtroom right now. And I think, it's important to remember that this is continued testimony. So the jury is working off of, and the prosecution's working off of, what Keith Davidson has already told them in his testimony, both on Tuesday, as well as what he'll be telling them today. And part of what he has said related to timing is that after that Access Hollywood tape came out a couple weeks before the 2016 election, that is when there was suddenly this renewed interest in Stormy Daniels' story. So these allegations that she was making had been out there for some time, but then interest in her story, quote, reached a crescendo in that moment. Jeremy, how important is that detail?
It's important because it really goes to that motive and intent, why it became so important to the former president, then President Possible-elect.
And the prosecution has to prove intent.
Correct. And they have to prove that there's not just the intent, but what was that other crime? And as you just said moments ago, that there was a campaign-related or election-related crime that was violated. It's not just that something was altered. It's not just that you had the intent to defraud, but it also included this second intent to commit or hide or further another crime. So this all ties back to why he was doing it, meaning the former president. And I would say, one of the holes, and not to jump too much off, but one of the holes that we have that the defense, I assume, is going to pick up on is you hear about assumptions and probability, but no firm still connection that Donald Trump was paying the bill. It was the boss, you heard, but not that Donald Trump was doing it. It was Michael Cohen. And if you're attacking Michael Cohen more, it's just another avenue. But the prosecution is going to be prepared for it. They know already it's the Michael Cohen credibility show.
Well, and maybe they're trying to get out in front of this idea this was all Cohen, because one of the things that they've been talking about with Keith Davidson, who's there, is that he's telling them that he suspected Trump would have been the one ultimately to make the payments here, to exchange the money. He called it an assumption, but he pointed to how in 2016, Michael Cohen had told him, quote, my guy, referring to Trump, was on the campaign trail, that Cohen couldn't make decisions in his absence. Davidson saying that he figured it meant Cohen didn't have the authority to actually spend the money. Katie, what more does the prosecution need to get out of Davidson?
Well, you have to finish the chronology. I mean, there's a reason why it began with the Karen McDougal, and it's going through the Stormy Daniels part of the chronology right now. But I would note that what's been entered into evidence are texts and emails, one of which that we saw into evidence on Tuesday was Michael Cohen later on, after this whole thing started of this arrangement, saying, expletive, I'll just pay it, or I'll just take care of it, which further buttresses and corroborates the idea that it was never supposed to be Michael Cohen's money in the first place. Why would Cohen say, blanket, I'll just take care of it, I'll just pay for it? So what you're seeing here is, regardless of the attacks on the credibility of witness, which happens all the time, that's a regular thing that happens from the prosecution to the defense to the prosecution, the lies, there are no lies from the paper. There's no lies from the account bank statement opening of the account paperwork, right? There's no lies from the texts and the emails. And what's interesting is, even though Keith Davidson said, I was starting to kind of have mistrust in Michael Cohen as to whether or not he was actually going to deliver, it doesn't mean that Cohen was a liar. Cohen was clearly doing the spin and trying to cover for his boss, who he said is traveling and campaigning, and I can't get to him, and I can't get him to sign. I mean, there were all these excuses and transparency that were being given by Michael Cohen, some of which were, insufficient to kind of assuage the concerns on the other side. But the timing is everything, as I say, right? And the timing ended up being this mad dash across the finish line to get it done before Election Day of November 2016. And the paperwork corroborates it. So even if you don't believe Michael Cohen, you can believe the corroborating paperwork, the text, the communications that all say and buttress his credibility as a witness.